This film was announced in November 2008 when Anchor Bay Entertainment released a teaser poster for the film. Adam Green stated that he would be writing and directing, depending on how long the other project he was working on took. He also stated that if the projects took too long, he would pass writing and directing duties on to someone else. On November 24, 2009, it was officially announced that Adam Green would return to write and direct. The final draft of the script was completed on December 7, 2009. In order to keep details under wraps, even the crew did not receive copies of the script, and the majority of cast only received select pages. Fake scripts, fake endings, and fake storylines were circulated around the industry, and no visitors or guests were allowed near the set. The cast gathered for their first table reading on December 15, 2009, which would eventually become Adam Green's 2010 film, Hatchet 2.
Hey, man. Who's Victor Crowley?
He's nothing. Local boogeyman story about a retarded maniac who haunts Honey Island. People just use it to keep kids away from the swamp.
You mean like a Jason Voorhees or something?
Something like that.
When I was 8, I lived in this town called Glen Echo. Our ghost stories about this man named Leslie Vernon.
Let them fight. You're a wizard, Harry. You're gonna need a bigger boat. I'll be back.
Death has come to your little town, Jim.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Chills and Thrills. Connor here with you along with Chris, and today we are looking at the second chapter in the Hatchet franchise with Hatchet 2. So, Chris, how do you feel about this one on your first viewing?
I actually had time to view it twice, and yeah, it's solid. I'd say in most ways, I actually say pretty much in every way I prefer it to the first one. I think it's kind of got a bit more of a sense of humor about it, and it goes just as hard with the kills and the gore, and a larger role for Tony Todd, which is always nice. And Danielle Harris replacing the lead. I'm a stickler for things like continuity. I don't like to see characters and actors and actresses get replaced, but I can't lie and pretend that Danielle Harris isn't an improvement on the actress from the first film.
Absolutely, and again, this we talked about it on our first episode with the first Hatchet. This was another one of the ones that I seen. 10th grade classroom on lunch with my teacher and a couple of my fellow students and stuff. And even now, like today, I agree with you that it's much improved on the first one. I think I usually don't dive into, like the writing and things like that to like kind of like the more B movies. If it's like a big like box office film, like I'll compare like writing to this film and that film and things like that. But like I think the writing improved. I think the special effects improved. The characterizations, I like you said, I think everything in this film is an improvement. And being a Halloween fan and a horror fan in general, like of course Danielle Harris is always welcome. And it's just I think this one is definitely an improvement. And this is another one, when I want to just put on like a horror movie in the background and while I clean the house or something. The Hatchets are, all these films are some of them that I'll just throw on, or if I'm bored, they're a quick like 80 minutes. I'll throw one on if I'm got like an hour and a half or 2 hours before I have to go play volleyball or whatever I got to do. Like I'll throw these on because they're a quick watch.
Yeah, if I were to give kind of any criticism toward this movie, is that it did feel like there was a middle section in there where there wasn't a whole lot of killing happening. It felt like there was kind of a chunk in there where they were just setting up the plot and the whole new cast and the mission where it wasn't really moving at a breakneck pace in terms of on-screen kills, but it's not so bad, and it wasn't anything that ruined the movie.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about the middle third. Probably from like literally like a half hour to the hour mark, it gets a little slow. But with it keeps you entertained enough to keep going and like just kind of in anticipation for like the final showdown of this second film. It gives you just enough.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll hit you with a little background on this film. Hatchet 2 is a 2010 American slasher film written and directed by Adam Green. It is a sequel to his original Hatchet film and the second installment in the film series, and it picks up right where the first film ended. Hatchet 2 follows Mary Beth as she escapes the clutches of the deformed swamp-dwelling Victor Crowley. After learning the truth about her family's connection to the hatchet-wielding madman, Mary Beth returned to the Louisiana swamps along with an army of hunters to recover the bodies of her family and exact the bloodiest revenge against the Bayou Butcher that she can. The film sees the return of actor Kane Hodder and Tony Todd, who portrayed Victor Crowley and Reverend Zombie in the 2006 film, and Danielle Harris portrays Mary Beth, a role originally played by Tamara Feldman. The film was originally screened at the 2010 London Fright Fest Film Festival on August 26, 2010, and it was released unrated in the United States on October 1st, 2010. So there is a little background on Hatchet 2.
Yeah, very nice, very nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't I go ahead and we'll go ahead and get into a quick trailer, a plot synopsis, and we'll come back with some numbers and some fun facts and all our favorite categories for the second Hatchet film.
Sounds good.
In 2007, director Adam Green brought us Hatchet, the return of the great American slasher and the birth of horror's newest villain, Victor Crowley. Old school American horror with buckets and buckets and buckets of blood. But American theaters saw a censored version of the film. Now, in 2010, Victor Crowley returns to the big screen in the ultimate slasher sequel, Hatchet 2. And for the first time in over 25 years, a horror film is coming to major cinemas uncensored, uncut, uncompromised. Gore like you've never seen in the theater before. More deaths. More carnage. More Crowley. Adam Green's Hatchet 2.
Picking up immediately after the first Hatchet, Mary Beth Dunstan is attacked by Victor Crowley but manages to escape. Jack Cracker finds her and takes her back to his cabin, but forces her to leave after finding out her last name, telling her to visit Reverend Zombie. Not long after she leaves, Jack is killed by Victor. Mary Beth returns to Reverend Zombie's shop, and he lets her in. After learning her last name, he tells her that her father, Samson, was one of the boys responsible for causing the fire that led to Victor's death as a child. He also gives her more details on Victor's backstory. Thomas, Victor's father, had cheated on his wife Cheyenne with her nurse Lena after Cheyenne was diagnosed with stomach cancer. Moments before dying, Cheyenne placed a curse on the child conceived by Lena from the affair. Months later, Lena gave birth to Victor Crowley but died of fright after seeing Victor's deformed face. Mary Beth tells Reverend Zombie she wants to go back and retrieve the remains of her father and brother. He agrees, but tells her she must bring a family member with her. After she leaves, Zombie calls Justin, the brother of Sean from the first Hatchet, and tells him to summon a group of hunters, specifically including a man named Trent Graves, to go with them. Mary Beth returns home, where her Uncle Bob promptly shows up. He reluctantly agrees to accompany her to a recruitment meeting in Zombie's shop, where Zombie tells the hunters he will pay them $5,000 for the head of Victor Crowley. Mary Beth, Bob, and the hunters proceed to venture into the swamp. As night descends, they find the boat, and as the rest leave, two of the hunters, Cletus and Chad, stay by the boat while the others fan out. Mary Beth, Zombie, Justin, Bob, and Trent look for Crowley's shed, as well as the bodies of his victims. Along the way, Zombie explains to Justin that Trent, Samson, and Samson's brother were the kids who started the fire that led to Victor's death. Since Samson has already been killed by Victor, Zombie believes that if Crowley kills Bob and Trent, his soul will be at peace and he will finally leave the swamp. Meanwhile, Victor begins murdering each of the hunters one by one. While searching the cabin, the remaining party members hear Victor outside. As they hide, Justin tells Mary Beth about Zombie's plot to get her uncle and Trent killed. As she runs to warn Bob, Victor appears behind Justin and kills him with a belt sander. Trent is murdered quickly thereafter, and Zombie drags Mary Beth out of the house, trapping Bob inside with Victor Crowley, who murders him. Zombie declares Victor Crowley is dead, but Mary Beth then reveals Bob was not her real uncle. He was actually her father's best friend, and that her real uncle had died of leukemia when Mary Beth was 12. Now realizing his plan has failed, Reverend Zombie turns to see Victor breaking through the wall of the cabin. Zombie attempts to fight Victor, but is brutally killed in doing so. Seconds later, however, Mary Beth strikes Victor in the head with his own hatchet, knocking him to the ground, before she hysterically chops his head into a bloody pulp. She then grabs Reverend Zombie's shotgun and fires it into the remains of Victor Crowley's head, seemingly killing him as the screen goes black. Alright, I'll hit you with some quick numbers here. This film did have quite a bit more money compared to the first one, which is nice. The first one had a $1.5 million budget, and in comparison, this one had a budget of $2.5 million. So I mean, on a cheap film, I'm sure $1 million could go a long way.
Yeah, you're talking about, 1.5 to 2.5. That's, you're nearly doubling the budget. That's pretty significant.
Yeah, absolutely. The box office return was not as good as this. I'll get into it a little bit later, but this was eventually pulled from theaters. It was in theaters for a very short run, but its box office return was $156,190. So it very minimal, but it did this film did do big, once like VH or DVD releases.
Yeah, films like this are made for the after theater market, and many horror movies that get made, even if they're sort of like an Insidious or something like that has like a $2-3 million budget, they will still be marketed with 10, 20, 30 million by the studio, just because that's some of the minimum that you have to do to be able to market a nationwide theatrical release. With a movie like this with a 2.5 million budget, they essentially spent zero on any kind of ad campaign or marketing or big distribution. So they're actually only in for about $2 million. They're not having another 20 million of marketing to cover. So when you just shotgun this thing into theaters and then just let it be on the whole market, 2 million is a pretty insignificant amount of revenue to recover. So, that's kind of the business model for these micro budget horror movies.
Yeah, I mean, like you said kind of in the last episode, that these might have been a precursor to like the Terrifier films, but I mean, these definitely have these definitely have their like cult following of horror fans and whatnot. So I mean, these films, after so much time had passed, these films did all right, and they definitely made some money back.
Oh, for sure, for sure. When you're that inexpensive, it's almost impossible not to make your money back as a horror movie, just because there's horror fans are always dedicated and they always give things a look. And so there's no way for these things to have lost money.
Yeah, I have watched 100% way stupider and like way worse films than this. So anything that's B, especially if I see a movie that it looks cheap and stuff, if I know that one of the actors in it, such as like a Danielle Harris, or in the first one they had Dion Richmond playing Marcus, like I'm going to take a look at that film because I know those actors from other films. Even if the film ends up being terrible, I see that actor's in it, and it makes me curious. So I'm going to give it a watch.
Yeah, it's always fun to see a familiar face.
Absolutely. Hatchet 2 is rated a 5.5 out of 10 on IMDb. It holds a 44% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, a 49% rating on Metacritic, and then 73% of Google users liked this film. So again, our Google users are always the high one.
Yep, sounds about right.
Here's our good number that, us horror fans, this is one of the only things we care about. There are 19 total deaths in this film, including Victor Crowley at the end, which averages to one death every 4.47 minutes.
That sounds about right.
There were only 11 deaths in the first film, averaging to about every 7.5 minutes. So they definitely upped the ante here.
Yep. That's what everyone wants to see.
Absolutely. And we definitely get some good ones that we'll get into here shortly. That is all I have for numbers on Hatchet 2. So I'll get into some fun facts. Of course, I always have some of them. And this first one is what I was talking about with the film being pulled from theaters. The unrated version of the movie was shown in 60 theaters on its debut weekend across the United States and Canada, and most of the theaters were unaware of the extent of the extreme violence in this film, and nearly all of the theaters had stopped playing the movie by that following Monday morning.
Yeah, that tracks.
And it sucks because nowadays you can damn near show anything you want in theaters. Yeah. I mean, the new Terrifier showed a guy getting cut, from his groin up with a chainsaw. Yeah. So these films are respectively light compared to those.
Yeah, and that film's clearing 50 million in North America. It's just the times have changed a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd say that, Victor Crowley is as big as a star nowadays as Terrifier, Art the Clown is becoming.
Oh, definitely not, but,
He could have been. There was a possibility.
Yeah, they're in another world, these films walked so that movies like Terrifier could run.
Absolutely, 100% agree with you there. My next fun fact for you is, according to the horror website bloodydisgusting.com, this movie's final tally of fake blood used in its making is 136 gallons. That's 81 gallons more, and more than double the amount used in the making of Hatchet 2006, which reportedly used 55 gallons of fake blood.
Nice. Well, I mean, again, those are the stats you want to make sure you're upping your game on every time.
Yeah, that's... For a B movie, a B slasher, 136 gallons of blood. That, man.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious how much, they paid for each gallon of blood. How much that would cost per gallon.
Yeah, you'd think you buy it in bulk, you get a discount.
Yeah, no kidding. Have you seen Adam Green's, one of his first earlier films, Frozen?
I have, and I was wondering if you were going to mention that bit of trivia.
I have that right here. There is a cameo. The character Parker O'Neill, played by Emma Bell from Adam Green's movie Frozen, is seen briefly on the television in Reverend Zombie's voodoo shop, speaking to the news cameras about the lawsuit and settlement against the ski mountain from the film where they got trapped. Now, I wasn't sure if you had seen that because, that's another hidden kind of gem in my mind. So I like that film as well.
Yeah, fun little reference and connection. That's one thing that it seems to be horror fans and horror films kind of lean into having some fun with kind of links and connections to and references to other movies. There's a bit of there's a bit of dialogue that I'll talk about later that does a little bit more of that, and so we'll get into that. But yeah, that's a lot of fun when movies do stuff like that.
Yeah, if people listening don't know, the Adam Green's Frozen is about a couple and then another friend where they get trapped on a ski resort. They shut it off while they're up at the top, and they ended up getting trapped up there all weekend, and they have to find a way down. And That's all I'll say. I would recommend that film. So, give it a quick watch. I think that's another 85-minute film by him, and it's completely different than these Hatchet films. So give it a watch if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, good low budget horror movie.
The chainsaw that Kane Hodder handles in one scene in this film weighed 120 pounds. So that'll give you some ideas of the strength to Kane Hodder.
Yeah, he's a beast.
Absolutely. Clearly why he keeps getting cast in these type of films.
Yep, even into his not so young years, we'll say.
Yeah, I believe he's mid 60s now, somewhere around there,
so
early
he would have been
60s.
so what, 20 years ago or 15 to 20 years ago when these were getting made, he was still up there,
Adam Green has personally said that this is his favorite entry in the series.
Yeah, well, I mean, I haven't seen 3 or 4 yet, but I mean, it's certainly, I think, an improvement on the first.
Yeah, as always, I'm excited to see what you think about 3 and 4. Adam Green didn't direct 3, but he did come back for the fourth one.
Do you, without saying too much, do you have a strong opinion about whether or not you agree with his appraisal of this being the best of them?
With it being Danielle Harris's kind of like intro to the series, I think it's very strong. It's definitely up there. I would probably have to say with it'd probably be my favorite as well. But I mean, the
Okay.
third one without him directing it takes a little bit different of a director's approach. Still a good Hatchet film.
Mhm.
And then the fourth one with him coming back, it was kind of like fan service. So he did a fan service film, but again, still another good low budget film. But I would probably have to agree with him. Yeah.
I got you.
During the meeting, when Reverend Zombie is offering the bounty, one character mentions Jason Voorhees. He then also mentions he comes from the town of Glen Echo, and that town's urban legend is known as Leslie Vernon, a reference to Behind the Mask, the rise of Leslie Vernon from 2006.
Yes, you just got my favorite. That was in my section as my favorite lines of dialogue from the movie. Those are the dialogue lines that I picked as my favorite that they reference within the same conversation. They reference Jason Voorhees and Leslie Vernon, and I was like, oh, that's a lot of fun. That's like a cool little like deep cut for horror fans.
Yeah, that's one reason I like Adam Green's films, and that ties into again another one of my little fun facts later on down here. But he's always doing fan service. He's always putting in little winks and nods, and as we've stated 100 times, we love that.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Here's another one that I had from our first episode. In each of the 3 Hatchet films, someone says the line, "You've got to be fucking kidding me." And in this film, it's Reverend Zombie.
Yep, and you just aped my other choice for favorite line of dialogue. So don't complain when I don't have one. You've taken both of them that I love the most. But yes, yeah, it's a great reprise, and they pick a great moment to break it out in this movie.
Absolutely, and that is fine. When I ask it to you, I'll probably just have you repeat it. And
yeah.
Here's a shocker one. This film was shot in 17 and a half days.
Good Lord Almighty. That's chaotic to think about. I mean, I know horror movies tend to have these pretty short shoots, and they're all typically sort of in one location, and they're relatively simple, in terms of production. But that sounds wild. That sounds pretty wild.
Yeah, you would still figure a couple months, a month or two, because you figured these guys, they had to have been shooting like 12, 14-hour days.
Uh-huh. Yeah, there's no way. And all these long nights, all these night shoots, like that I don't envy that at all.
No, thank you. I have done third shift, and I I don't think I'd want to be working on a movie covered in sweat or fake blood and wet clothing and stuff while I'm working through the night. No, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This film, Hatchet 2, is included on Roger Ebert's most hated list. So middle fingers to Roger Ebert. No.
Yeah, I mean, they have, no love lost there on either side of the fence.
There's always somebody, and of course these films are made for fun, and some people just they just can't look at them that way.
Yep. To quote Jason Lives there, some folks got a real messed up idea of entertainment. So, there you go. Something like that.
My last one for you here again goes off of the first episode we did on the Hatchet film. And this film continues Adam Green's love for adding horror icons to play parts in his films, along with returning actor Kane Hodder, Tony Todd, and John Carl Buechler from the first film. He added Scream Queen Danielle Harris, who has starred in 4 Halloween films and more, R.A. Mihailov, who portrayed Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, and then director Tom Holland, who directed classics such as the 1988 Child's Play, Fright Night from 1985, and Thinner from 1996.
Oh, okay. I did not realize that was him.
Yes, he is her uncle.
And I was about to make a joke about, Tom Holland looking nothing like he looked in the Spider-Man movies, but whatever. The original Tom Holland, the first Tom Holland. That's awesome. He was also the writer of Psycho 2, which is an exceptionally deserving sequel to Psycho. I know many horror sequels don't live up to classics. You would never think a sequel to Psycho would be good, but I've said it before. Psycho 2 is very, very, very good.
And I have seen the first Psycho and the remake, and again, I have not seen any other of them, so I need to hop on those.
The second one is definitely a much better companion piece than the remake, that's for sure. I'd double feature the original and the sequel over the original and the remake any day of the week.
All right. High praise from Chris. That means I got to watch
Psycho 2's great. Psycho 2's great. Sorry, it is.
I am all right with that. I will have to watch that. Like I said, the more we record, the longer my list gets because the more we talk about other films.
Yeah.
That is all I have for you on the fun facts section. So if we want to cruise right along and get right into our favorite character, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, sure. Excuse me. I'm yawning here. All right. I did like it's tough. I don't just want to name like 3 characters, but I thought Mary Beth in this movie was a big improvement over the first one, and Danielle Harris kind of plays her in more of like the kind of brings a bit more of like the archetype, that she's like, the final girl always has to get kind of beat up and ran through the ringer a little bit before she kind of rages out and fights back, and that she kind of fits that mold. I love that Tony Todd has an expanded role as Reverend Zombie, even though he's sort of a villain, so to speak. You still always like Tony Todd. The character of Vernon was great comedic relief, and then Uncle Bob was good because he's like the only guy that was like, he was not having any of the nonsense of the movie. He seemed to see through all of the bull crap, so he was interesting. It's always good to have one of those characters in a horror movie. But I'd say Mary Beth gets most improved from the first film.
Absolutely, that's who I chose as well. And Danielle Harris portrays her phenomenally. And I feel like she seems like a way stronger final girl in this. Like in the first one, she's the victim character. Of course, she's still going to look for her family, but she seems.
How do you not love Danielle Harris? Come on now.
Right. She seems way more like untamed in this one, and like clearly out for revenge, and like she's much more badass. Danielle Harris portrays her that way. Reverend Zombie is, Tony Todd, like, awesome. I like Trent because he's kind of like the background guy. Like, he knows how Reverend Zombie is, doesn't trust him, but he still goes out there with him because he's like, come on, man, you know I'm not scared of nothing and blah, blah. And, like, it's just, he's a large man, so what has he got to be afraid of? He thinks Victor Crowley's like a fake ghost story. So there's a lot of characters in this I liked. I was glad that we get Perry Shen back as Justin. He played a different character in the first film, so I liked seeing him.
I liked seeing that. That was fun. It was a good way to bring back an actor without bringing back the character.
Absolutely. I liked seeing John Carl Beekler back as Jack Cracker. I liked his little quick scene in the first film, and I liked what we got of him in this, kind of like expanding on, like, not exactly giving Mary Beth what she needed to know, but kind of like striking the fear into her to make her go searching for the truth. I like that.
Yeah.
But it's definitely an easy choice to say Mary Beth was my favorite of the film, along with you.
Yep.
I'll go ahead and give you my favorite score for the film, which this film, again, you know, the score for this one wasn't nothing to like write home about or like save to your playlist on YouTube or Spotify or anything. And I don't have too much to say about it, but the one that stood out to me was "If You Find Him, You'll Know." And it just, that one just stood out because I felt like all the other ones were a little bland. And I just, that one kind of had the best like instrumentation, or like it fit the scene that it was in the best for me. The rest were kind of just background noise.
The opening credits music. I don't know if it has a specific track name, but I mean, it's this kind of like rock theme, and honestly, like that was like the most I noticed the music throughout the whole movie. You know, I'm not trying to hate on the music or anything, but it's kind, you know, horror films, like they can kind of fall into the trap of it being a little just sort of generic or very absent and only there for like a few good like string hits or something, you know, for the jumps, or just kind of generic like dun, 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 you know, sort of stuff. But the opening credits like was kind of like, all right, yeah, we're in for a good time, you know, sit back, buckle up, and just like enjoy the movie, and it kind of has that gung ho feeling to it. So I liked that.
I could stop if I wanted to.
Absolutely. Along with the first one, man, with Marilyn Manson's song that plays over the credits of that film. I was jamming along with the credits of this one as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I know I spoiled your favorite quotes, but do you want to go ahead and give us what you got?
Yeah, sure. I'll say the whole dialogue exchange between the characters of Chad and Leighton, where he says like, "Hey man, who's Victor Crowley?" Well, he's nothing, a local boogeyman story about a retarded maniac who haunts Honey Island. People just use it to keep kids away from the swamp. You mean like a Jason Voorhees or something? Something like that. Well, when I was 8, I lived in this town called Glen Echo. Our ghost story is about this man named Leslie Vernon. You know, that's just fun. And I like here in that the way that they say like Jason Voorhees or something, you can kind of have fun with it. It's like, are they referring to the movies with Jason Voorhees, or are they referring to Jason Voorhees as his actual local myth that exists within this world. So you can kind of interpret it as like, hey, like the events of the Friday the 13th movies exist within this reality as well, which is just another fun way of looking at it.
Yeah, is Jason Voorhees canon in the
Yeah,
Hatchet franchise?
I think so, because it seems like that's where they're going with Leslie Vernon. They don't say like, oh, like the movie Leslie Vernon. So I kind of like to interpret it as like, yeah, like this is canon. It's a horror verse. We got it all in here.
Absolutely. I'm cool with saying that Jason Voorhees and Leslie Vernon are canon.
Yeah,
We can go
yeah,
with that.
like the iconic opening scene from Bride of Chucky that shows all of the various. They have a Michael Myers mask, a Jason Voorhees hockey mask, a Freddy Krueger glove, a chainsaw. Like the opening of Bride of Chucky does like a really cool thing with that as well.
Yeah, it's all locked up in evidence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As a
That
little kid,
that
who
scene
like,
tripped me out as a little kid. I was like, "What is going on here?"
yeah. As a little kid watching those movies, I was that was like mind blowing. I was like, what? It's just, you don't think any of that stuff is possible, and it was just validation.
Yeah, it's a fun little shared universe moment, especially for a little kid who's watching those.
Mm-hmm.
Mine's a little more. I had trouble choosing a favorite quote with this one, but I ended up going with something Vernon said. He was he was talking to Reverend Zombie when they're on the boat, and he goes, "What's up with that Blair Witch, man? I'd tap that, but she'd probably have cobwebs sealing it up. And even if I did hit that, a bunch of bats come flying out of it." And he pauses and he goes, "Voodoo, magic," and it just gives me a good laugh every time, because he's such like a stupid, like goofy character that fit him perfectly. So that's the one I chose from him.
Yeah, he's the stock character. I love when he's singing a song that seems completely improv about the chicken and biscuits and gravy. It's like, oh my goodness, man! Like it's just great. You need a character like that in these
Got
movies.
the biscuits with the gravy and chicken.
Yeah, yeah.
And chicken and gravy and biscuits and chicken and gravy and the chickens with the biscuits on the gravy with the biscuits, and the chicken wants a biscuit, for the biscuit is me.
He's a good character. Him and I can't remember what his buddy's name was, that they're like constantly punching each other back and forth, and
Mm-hmm.
his buddy's almost like I don't think he says a word the entire anytime he's on screen, but they
Yeah.
have a good little chemistry where they're constantly joking back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I had you go first for that one, so I will give you my favorite scene. And hands down, I mean, this was probably the easiest thing I chose from this film. My favorite scene was when Trent ends up fighting Victor, because it's Kane Hodder, who he's famous for being the stuntman and playing like Jason Voorhees, and now he's playing Victor Crowley. And Trent, his big break was playing like Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. So you got just two like alpha males here going at it, and Trent
Mm-hmm.
holds his own the entire fight. He is handling Victor Crowley and giving him the works until Victor
Yeah.
Crowley finally kicks him in his knee, and I don't know if he hyperextends it or like breaks his leg.
It like breaks it backwards. Looks like it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then from there on out, Victor he sets his head up on the table and kicks it, and there goes his head split in two. But that
Yeah.
scene where Trent tackles him on the
A curb stomping, but on the table instead, and
literally,
and severing the top part of his head doing that almost got my favorite kill as well.
yeah, that was phenomenal. I like how they made Trent get the upper hand for so long. He's tackling him on the table. He's hitting him with the combos and everything. But that little like couple minute segment there was my favorite scene in the film for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of cheating, because that's kind of all part of like the climax, and the final battles of these movies are always kind of what you want. Once they reveal that Bob was not her blood uncle, and then Victor Crowley comes out and he's just taking out Tony Todd, and then and then Mary Beth has to take out Victor. Like that sequence of just the escalation of it. That would probably be my favorite sequence of the whole film. It just gets that intensity right.
Absolutely. And that, Reverend Zombie thinks that he's won, it's all
Mm-hmm.
over. And she's like, my real uncle died of leukemia, I believe it was, when I was 12. And you can just see the reaction of Reverend Zombie, like, oh no.
Yep. It's especially funny as a guy that, my friends' kids call me Uncle Chris. So it's funny to be like, yeah, like just because someone's called their uncle doesn't mean they're a blood uncle, and one of my dad's friends was my Uncle Steve growing up. So
Yep, I'm sure we all have it. My buddy's daughters do the same thing. They call me Uncle
Mhm.
Connor, and
Yep.
I'm sure eventually my little girl will do the same to him because he's always around. So
Yep.
it's just nice to see that little bit of twist at the end, and he looks
Uh-huh.
up and Victor's there, and yeah, I would have liked to seen a little bit longer fight. Reverend Zombie put up a little bit more, but it's also nice to
Yeah, for
see
sure.
it. After Trent put up a fight, it's nice to see Victor Crowley kind of like take out a guy his size like no problem.
Uh-huh, indeed.
So I'm sure there's a couple of these we're going to talk about, but what was your favorite kill or death scene from the film?
I'd have to. You kind of already mentioned the sort of the curb stomp on the table, which is a great one. I kind of already in a roundabout way talked about like Tony Todd being sort of ripped in half, but the decapitation during the lovemaking was definitely the most. It's not the most violent or crazy, but it gets inventive style points for sure, and it's just darkly comedic and I knew about that scene before I ever even saw this movie, and it's still it just it's a one of a kind. So how do you not mention that one?
I just clearly it's an inappropriate scene for any younger viewers, but I just like that
It's an inappropriate scene for anybody.
the after he cuts his head off, he kind of like everything stops, and I just like her line, like, you didn't fall asleep on me again, did you? And I'm just like, what?
Yeah. The idea of someone falling asleep while standing on their knees during that act is just absolutely comedic. Like got narcolepsy or something.
It's that one, that's just something in the film that always gives me a laugh too. It's like, are you
Mhm.
kidding me right now? Who thinks of this?
Mhm.
My favorite kill would probably, I like we said, we talked about the Trent, and that's up there for me, but I really liked the double chainsaw with, the chainsaw is like, that thing has to be like 8 feet long or something like that. I didn't find anything on that, but just another one of those kills where he puts it between both guys' legs and lifts up,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the harness and the wire work that it had to have taken to get that right, and the time that went into it. That's the kill that got me, because being a guy, you're just like,
Yeah.
that hits you in a soft spot.
Yeah. You get yeah. No arguments there. No arguments there.
So that was my favorite kill. I like that you brought up the Reverend Zombie one. Victor Crowley ends up like stepping on his upper back towards his like shoulder blades, and ends up pulling like his skin off. I thought that was kind of
Yeah.
weird, and that was like an odd twist for that kill, but it was effective. I was like, whoa,
Yeah,
what are we doing
he
here?
like he like almost gave him the Predator or something, ripping the
Yeah,
skin off.
yeah. Adam Green is definitely clever with it, and like imaginative with some of the kills he has in these films.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that is all we have for our favorites category. Did you think anything different of the Victor Crowley makeup. I know they had a higher budget for this film,
It
so
seemed,
it looks a little
you know,
better.
yeah, without like getting like a side by side image, it seemed to be kind of upgraded or a little different, and it's hard to tell because it's like he's getting like damaged and stuff. So it's like I don't know if it's accounting for that. It didn't seem so dramatic that I'm like, oh, this is a totally different makeup, but it did. It is different. Am I right? It is like altered a little bit or improved or
It looks like it fits his face better, like the makeup sits on his face a little better in this one.
yeah,
I
maybe
thought when I
molded a little bit more.
yeah, because I'm sure I believe I've looked it up, or somebody I was watching on YouTube looked it up and put up a side by side, or it's on Google or something, and you can just see like little subtle differences. But all around, I like this Victor Crowley. I love how they kind of keep continuing, at least from the first one to this one. They improve his look. One thing I will say that we didn't mention during the death scenes, because they do technically say that Victor Crowley died in this one, was Danielle Harris going and Mary Beth going berserk on him and chopping his head to smithereens and then blowing it up with the shotgun. I
Yeah,
thought that was a
yeah.
great effect.
The final shotgun blast was a great punctuation on that sequence for sure.
And again, like the first one, this one ends just like that. As soon as that shotgun goes off and you see the head blow up, bam, we go to black.
Yeah, yes. One of these days they'll have to do the special Blu-ray edition that does stitch at least the first three entries together and just make it this big, 4-hour thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't be against it. I probably wouldn't watch it all in one sitting, but
Yeah. Yeah, maybe they could, tinker with the editing a little bit to trim up each entry so that it's not the full like 4.5 hours. Maybe you slice some things out here and there and kind of reformat it a little bit. It could maybe work.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, clearly, with that, our next film, I don't, we'll have to see if they keep going with like the ends with like a sudden moment and opens with a sudden moment, or I don't
Yeah.
mind that they do that, as long as you continue the story where we left off. Don't end
Yeah,
that and then start with
that's
something
yeah.
random.
Yeah, that's the gamble, if you end your film on a cliffhanger ending, you don't necessarily have any guarantee that you're going to get the next entry. Especially in the world of these sort of low budget horror movies, any number of things could happen. In theory they're so cheap it's easy to get one made, but also, it could be easy to just be like, well, no one watched that, we're not doing another one. So it's a risky thing.
Yeah, I wish I could have found. I probably would have had to dig a little bit deeper on what this film made with like DVD sales and whatnot. So maybe I'll have to dig a little deeper and
Well, I would guarantee it'd be a lot more than 2 million.
yeah. I mean, if I find it, I'll mention it on our next episode when we talk about the third one, and
Yeah.
maybe
And I'm watching these on Tubi, and Tubi's they're ad supported, but I mean, you don't get the license for movies for free, they paid something. I'm sure this isn't getting paid as much as, some big mainstream Hollywood hit is getting paid to stream on Tubi, but it's not zero, so I mean, you have to imagine that across all platforms and things, there's a lot of ways that these things just get sort of monetized and remonetized.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean I
They didn't
have
make they didn't make four of them for nothing.
right, and I have all four of these on Blu-ray, but for the viewings, I've been watching them on Tubi as well, just being
Yeah.
lazy and not popping the disc in.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm all for no ads, but sometimes like the ad supported thing like Tubi, like it brings back the old school feeling of watching a scary movie on TV where you'd have a commercial break. It kind of, I don't know. There's a little bit of a vintage vibe to that I kind of dig.
Get up, grab your popcorn, get some ice cream whenever you got
Yeah,
a bathroom
yeah,
break.
exactly. Yeah, do what you got to do. Yeah, it's fun.
Absolutely. I think that is all we have for the second Hatchet, or Adam Green's Hatchet 2.
Yeah, indeed. Hatchet 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Clearly, again, as we've stated multiple times in our first and this episode, is this film had a direct sequel, Hatchet 3, which was released June 14th, 2013. So we will be looking at that on our next episode as we continue to dive and dig into the Hatchet franchise. So yeah, that is all we have for Hatchet 2. So Chris, as always, thank you. I appreciate you binging these with me. I know you'd never seen them, so you had no idea what you were in for. So I appreciate you taking a chance with me on these so far.
Yeah, no, it's fun. It's fun. It's nice to kind of, it's always fun to go back to movies that you love, but it's also nice to just kind of check out something new and kind of be like, oh, like surprised and see what's in store,
All right, well, why don't we go ahead and get into some final thoughts on Hatchet 2.
So my final thoughts on Hatchet 2 would be that it is a pretty clear improvement in almost every way over Hatchet. The production value is a little bit higher. The casting and the performances are a little bit stronger. It's embracing the kind of the campy tone in a way that seems a little bit more earnest. It's a bit more in on the joke as a B movie. It feels more intentional. It doesn't feel like it's sort of falling into being a kind of fun time. It feels like it's trying a bit more on purpose to occupy this certain space of sort of horror comedy, and I like that. The gore effects are as good as ever. It doesn't let up on that. The performance of Kane Hodder as Victor Crowley gets to still, shine. He gets to be a great slasher character still. So overall, it's a strong, come up in quality from the first movie, and it's just a really good throwback to that kind of fun vintage slasher movie era, while having a little bit of a wink and a nod to it as well. So it's a fun time if you're a fan of the genre.
Absolutely, Chris. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And I mean, my thoughts on this film, Hatchet 2, this is a film that I think is superior to the first film. I think the writing's better again. The acting is better. I mean, I love how the special effects continue to be practical and just bloody and all-out gory. I think these films are a good time, Through the first two Hatchet films, we've got horror, comedy, we got a little mix of everything. And I think Adam Green has a good time making these movies, and I thoroughly enjoy them, and I think it'll be fun checking out the next two with you, Chris. So I can't wait to do that. So I will say thank you to you for joining me as always. It's always a good time. Again, as I always say, I wouldn't be able to do this without you. But remember to check out our polls on Spotify. We have a poll under every episode that we release pertaining to that film, And we always like to see everyone's opinions. We usually put a couple of options under there. Check out our Instagram page of the same name, our Facebook page. We even started posting on X, or the old Twitter platform. And, we're going to try to keep this rolling. Next week we have Hatchet 3, which again wasn't directed by Adam Green, but he was a producer on it. So we continue the saga of Victor Crowley, and I can't wait to do that. I think it's going to be a blast for the next two films. So again, on our next episode, we have Hatchet 3. So Chris, once again, thanks for joining me. Thanks anyone who's out there listening. Please feel free to message us or interact with us any way you can. But Hatchet 3 next week, and until next time.
There's some freaks on this boat, man. What's up with that Blair Witch, man? I tapped that, but she probably got cobwebs sealing it up. And even if I did hit that, a bunch of bats probably come flying out of it. Voodoo. Magic. Just keep your eyes open. It's gonna be a long day.